He's co-chair of the group Ontario Place for All. He joins us now to talk some more about this. Norm, your group asked for an audit. What was your biggest concern about the redevelopment plan?
Yeah, I mean, we start with value for money. So the Ontario taxpayer is kicking in $650 million to facilitate a giant glass mega spa on our waterfront. And, we're putting in far more than what Therme is putting in. So what is it that we're getting out of this? Every Ontarian is going to be paying, a $50 or $60 Therme tax. And the government refuses to release any details of the contract so that Ontarians can understand what's in it for us. I mean, Ontario Place is supposed to reflect and celebrate Ontario and be the backyard for every Ontarian. And I just don't see how a giant glass mega spa accomplishes that. But our grandest concern here is value for money. And that's why we asked the Auditor General for this audit, along with advocacy groups Waterfront for All and Architectural Conservancy of Ontario.
Okay, so the company would invest $500,000 and would create, I understand, a 16-acre public park. Do you object to that money being spent? Do you object to the idea that it's a company funding a public park?
Yeah, so this sort of public realm that's going to be on West Island, first of all, so if you see West Island today, all of that will be erased, all 850 trees, everything that is there. And they're going to then drop a giant glass mega spa on top of everything that exists today at West Island. Then they're going to drop some infill around the giant glass mega spa, which is going to be this quote unquote public space. And there'll be a small amount of space on their roof. So, this is kind of privately operated public space. We don't know really ultimately who's going to manage it, when we're going to get in, when we're not. And it's of much lower quality than what we have today at West Island, which is like beautiful sort of forests and a lovely pebble beach that people go to swim at every single day of the year. What we have there, it can be revitalized, but we don't need to give it up for 95 years to a giant glass mega spa private enterprise.
Okay, let's talk about the more about the spending by the province of Ontario. $200 million, I understand, to prepare the land for the spa to go in, and then another $450 million for the underground parking lot for people to come to what would be an attraction. Do you have any issue with the parking idea of it, because it would bring people to the land?
Yeah, so what I would point out is that the X, which is right across the street, has 6,000 parking spots right now. So there's ample parking there. Ontario Place also has 1,200 parking spots currently. And then when we think about the X, which is right across the street, it has TTC service, GO service, and the Ontario line is going to terminate there. So, I think when we think about a modern attraction that's downtown, we don't need massive amounts of parking. We should be able to believe in our kind of higher orders of transit to get people there. And they could make a deal with the X. There's 6,000 parking spots at the X that they could leverage. And then we're not out $500 million for a giant underground parking lot. It's just not an efficient use of our money. And it's really a key part of the reason why we have gone to the Auditor General.
Okay, so just a point to that is that you would lose those parking spots in the summer for a few weeks, of course, when the X runs, and that would be a prime time for people wanting to go, right, to the Ontario Place activities as well. How would you envision Ontario Place? What do you see happening there that you think would be a good use of the land?
Yeah, so Ontario Place for All has come up with a proposal called A Better Idea, which is really meant to restart consultations. Ontarians weren't consulted in the first place when this Ontario government just went out and selected this mega spa and then told us, guess what, you're getting a spa. So we want to restart consultations, but we want to frame them around thinking about Ontario Place as a 21st century public space. So if you look at Trillium Park, which is part of Ontario Place, it's a very successful new part, opened in 2017. Everyone loves it. We costed out that it might cost about 100 million to spread sort of that beautiful Trillium Park goodness across Ontario Place to West Island, which sounds a whole lot better than 650 million. And we think that number is much higher. And I think that that's one of the things that's likely to come out of the Auditor General report.
What about the idea of putting Ontario's Science Centre at Ontario Place? Ontario Science Centre, to those who live outside of Toronto and even Ontario, is right now in a spot in the city that's, far away, and they are getting a subway line there, but things aren't really up and running yet. To physically have that at Ontario Place, do you think that's an added attraction and would be good for the public?
I think it's a really, unfortunately, it's just not a good idea. We're going to go from a 600,000 square foot science center down to, one that's about a third of that, maybe about 200,000 square feet. The Ontario government recognizes things like the rainforest, the planetarium, and part of the kids section won't be able to make it into this smaller science center. And if you talk to people who are in more suburban environments, like Councillor Anthony Peruzza comes to mind, he sort of called out, like people who live in North York, they have a really easy time to get to the science center where it is. But if you force them all to punt downtown, they're just much less likely to go visit. And the people of Flemington Park, the science center has grown into that community in such a beautiful way. I had a friend who went to Mark Garneau CI, and she wasn't well to do. And, because of the science program that was at Mark Garneau, which is just down the street from the Science Center, she was able to lift herself up. So, that Flemington Park community, that Thorncliffe Park community, and all of the suburban parts of Toronto and the GTA really like the Science Center where it's located. I had people visiting from outside of the city, and they did not want to come downtown. And I was like, wow, I've got the exhibit for you. Let's go to the Science Center. And they were really happy not to have to drive into downtown Toronto, which can be sort of an intimidating environment for somebody who doesn't drive in the downtown core very
It
much.
absolutely is, even for those of us who do live in Toronto. Let me ask you, as you think about reopening consultations, and if it does get to that, would you want to see any private development on the Ontario Place land?
If we start with the frame of a 21st century public space and with public interest driving the vision of Ontario Place, sure, there are fits for sort of commercial uses within that. Could there be a new venue that focuses on, let's say Ontario music? Sure. Could there be some like Ontario-based restaurants, some demonstrations of Ontario technology? Maybe sort of a satellite branch of the Science Center that focuses on climate change and the Great Lakes. Sure. I mean, you can look at Chicago's Millennium Park for like a waterfront done really well that mixes all uses, as well as Montreal's waterfront. It's just our problem with this is it looks like a really big cottage on a little island. You're trying to cram 14,000 people into a small place. And that spa dominates all of the nice sort of heritage cultural elements of Ontario Place. You'd have a hard time seeing the Cinesphere and the pods from most of the ground side, which is really unfortunate because those are two of the, that modernist architecture is one of the most special things about Ontario Place. And the beautiful landscape architecture that you find on West Island today,
Yeah.
which was planned by Michael Huff, all has to be erased for this giant glass mega spa. It's really just a sad development.
Norm Di Pasquale, good to have you on the program, sir. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.